Hey, welcome back to the Marketing Gateway. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and we're so glad to have you back for part 2 of our interview with Dr. Perry Drake. He is the Chair and Associate Teaching Professor of Marketing and Entrepreneurship at University of Missouri St. Louis, also known as UMSL. And he has done so many incredible things. He worked at New York University as an Assistant Professor of Integrated Marketing for 14 years. He has been at UMSL transforming their curriculum and their program. And he talked about that in our first interview. And it's something that he's going to continue to do as technology changes. He's going to make sure the students that are coming out of that program are well equipped. And one of the ways that he can help connect students to the real world is through this conference that we're going to talk about much more in part 2 of this interview. It is the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference, also known as the MDMC. And it is April 29th and 30th of this year, 2026. And we want you to be there. So please, while you're listening to this, go to bestmarketingconference.com and check it out. It is well worth your time. It is well worth your trouble. I'm going to be there. He's going to be there. We want to see you there too. And you can listen to this interview to find out why it's so important. Well, one of the things that we have to think about when we're training these students is this technology going to go anywhere? And okay, so let me give an example. A few years ago, everybody was talking about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, right? Yeah. Which seemed like, oh, wow, they're going to revolutionize art. Except a lot of us were pretty skeptical that they really were, because it didn't make a lot of sense for owning art. So there are folks that look at AI and go, well, there is bubble going on. And there's no question that there is an AI bubble in terms of just the way it's being pitched and sold. But is it going to transform the world the way people are saying it is? I tend to think it is. It reminds me a lot of when Google came on the scene back in the late 90s. But how are you teaching students to be ready for that change so that their skills are not immediately outdated when they get in the workforce?
Yeah, well, that was last semester, Sean. I did a presentation jointly with an adjunct faculty member from WashU. And we were talking about how to AI proof your career, basically, and just getting students, to showcase how they ideate with AI. If you're a finance major, go into AI and set up a scenario and say, hey, I would love to kind of create this scenario of looking at the financial stability of this that's not my world, finance, but kind of create these scenarios to play within AI so that you could actually turn it into a little case study and show a potential employer that you were playing with. At marketing, you could ideate and play with, different subject lines and email content and kind of go through these little scenarios to show, kind of how you would utilize it and kind of how your thought process is using these tools as an assistant. So that was some of the stuff we were doing. We tried to hit on how it's impacting every discipline for the most part, supply chain. I don't know what the terminology there is, not my world, like twin models, I think, which I could really see doing some cool simulations with AI of, there being a breakdown in one of the elements of the supply chain and how that might trickle down and how quickly and easily you could accomplish something with properly trained AI. Of course, I mean, I still have issues. I think we talked about, when you start getting too technical with it, it kind of falls apart sometimes on the detailed analyses. But I think, as Mike said, that's where you kind of build your own AI kind of components to deal with kind of your world of what you're dealing with. I loved his idea of me creating kind of my own AI chat sort of tool that knows all about me, so that, let's say, I've had all my background, I could have filled in and given them the sheet that you sent me, and it could have responsibly have done that, so to speak. So yeah, I'm a firm believer it's going to be a changer, but I think we're going to go to certain AI sort of, bots, so to speak, for certain things and to pull out certain pieces of information and things along. I'm kind of excited about it, but it's scary at the same time, in terms of, especially agentic AI, where then, this is where we, go very futuristic, in terms of where, the bots are kind of taking over the decision making. But, yeah.
Apologies, I had a cough there, and I
that's okay. That's okay.
Across the listeners, but great.
I give you a bottle of water, except we're virtual.
So, in terms of this conference that you have. So you came back to St. Louis and you
Right.
started this thing that's called the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference.
Right.
It's also known as the MDMC. And I love the website, by the way. The website URL, for those that don't know, is bestmarketingconference.com.
A great
I love
SEO
it.
hack, right? Yeah.
Very SEO.
Yeah.
But the event, the way you were describing it to me when we first talked, didn't start out anywhere near the way it is today. Today it draws in hundreds of people. You said it's drawn in thousands of people at some point.
Yeah. Right.
So tell me, how did this get started and how did this turn
Right.
into what it is today?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting journey too. And yeah, I started at UMSL January 1st, 2013. And, I had been gone 28 years from St. Louis. I knew nobody. So I knew if I was going to be effective here, I needed to dig in, find my community. So I was going to every industry function imaginable, the AMA conference. That was the first year, as you remember, Sean, that was in the History Museum. There was a big snowstorm. Hardly anybody showed up. A lot of the speakers didn't make it, but I met many people there, one of which was Wes Morgan, who's my good friend. I know he's a good friend of yours, and he hooked me up with you. And so I just did a lot of networking. And I met one person, Amanda, who presented. She's from the American Express travel related services or whatever. She caught me afterwards. She said, I know you don't remember me, but you came to an AMA event when you first moved here and it was lunchtime and you came over and sat down at our table and said, I don't know anybody. Is it okay if I sat with you? And then she said, the next thing I know, your face was everywhere. I said, well, that's because I did a lot of networking. But I decided, I had emailed a few of my old students at NYU because I had taught there for many years. So you got to realize a lot of my students had been at Google, at Facebook, American Express, Ogilvy and Mather, a lot of big publications. And so I called some of them and I said, hey, would you come in and guest speak to my students via Google Hangouts? Because that was the thing back then. And a couple of them said, Perry, I'd be happy to fly in and speak to your students if you wanted me to. And then I thought, well, crap. I mean, if you're going to do that, I'm going to put you in front of more than 30 students. So I reached out to many of my old students. Most of the speakers at that first conference were my old students. Nickelodeon, Forrester Research, Google, Yahoo. I'm trying to think what else. I had about 6 or 7 big players. And just through my network I built through social media, Twitter was big back in the day. If you remember 2013, it was pretty huge. And I didn't have a dime to my name, so I didn't spend a thing. I pulled in 325 people into the JCPenney Conference Center at UMSL. I probably had 325 tickets sold, so to speak, although they were free. 325 people showed up. I mean, the room was jam-packed. I did everything that year. I was the ticket taker. I sold the popcorn. I was the MC. I moderated. We had a couple panels. Oh my God, I had the worst migraine at the end of that day because I was under so much pressure. But that started it. And I think what grabbed people's attention is because I had brought people that we typically didn't have at St. Louis talking on marketing. And so that was kind of cool. And then we called it the State of Digital Media Marketing 2013. Huge success. Next year, I think I charged $49. We jumped to about $575, I think. Then I went to $99. We were a little over 700, and it was still a one-day event, but it was like TED style formats. Everybody was on the stage for about 20 minutes. And what's funny is, and I forgot to tell you about this, that third year, that's the year the lights went out. So we were all in the JCPenney auditorium and no windows in the auditorium, right? Just like the auditorium we were at Webster yesterday. So I had about 700 some odd people in there. Many people were sitting on the aisles because it was jam-packed. A huge thunderstorm was going through. The lights went out. I was freaking out and was running out to find my production director. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And then we both walked back in. You know what? They kept going. One guy opened up the laptops were still battery operated. Another guy had his phone shining on the speaker. It was my Twitter guy was on stage. They were just still going. And everybody obviously was tweeting, oh my goodness, the lights just went out at the digital conference. So what did we give away for swag the next year, Sean? We gave everybody a flashlight that said, in case the lights go out again this year. So it was kind of cute. And it just kind of, the community built, we were not like a typical, very corporate, tightly controlled conference. We were loose. We worked with sponsors any way they wanted to, all that sort of stuff. Then we moved off site to Union Station, and that's when I really started to jump. And then the year before COVID shut down, as I told you, I mean, we were close to 2,000 industry professionals. We had 125 speakers, 3 days, 8 concurrent sessions running simultaneously every hour on the hour. And then COVID just killed us. I mean, now, we're hovering 600 to 700 is where we're kind of at. And, I don't think, and that's why I asked Amanda yesterday about virtual events. It's like, the in-person events just aren't quite what they were. And I think right now also, I think a lot of companies are tightening their belts and looking at expenses. And so just trying to rethink through how I might want to repivot things. But I was excited to be at the AMA, but, it's a lot smaller than it used to be, just like MTMC is as well. And I think most, events out there, except maybe South by Southwest, which, will probably always be a gigantic party, so to speak. But hopefully that gives you a little trajectory of it. It started out as not thinking that this is where we were going to be. And the other thing too, which is funny, a lot of people think, well, were you not looking at it as a student conference? And I know the AMA is a little more focused on students than I am. I just always looked at it as an industry event by which students can take advantage of, I guess, because I always felt like my growth potential might be limited a little bit more if it was student focused. And I wanted to make sure it was a little more farther reaching than that, and also put UMSL on the map as kind of a leader within kind of this world, which, I rely heavily on my advisory board with, I mentioned Wes, he's on my advisory board. They all help with curriculum mapping, what are the things we need to talk about, not talk about, certifications, those sort of things. So I could talk forever, Sean. I think I answered your question and then some.
That's great. And I was just going to say, I've been to a number of conferences where they're expensive. They have celebrities, who get up and don't really tell you anything of any value. Right. A lot of times they're not very well run. And I think that's kind of burned a lot of people out on conferences because, again, there are so many virtual options now. But you go to the virtual conferences and you don't feel compelled to pay attention. And I remember I went to one last year, and I was on Blue Sky because I'm off Twitter now. I'm on Blue Sky, and I was live, what we call live tweeting it, and I wasn't getting any engagement. Nobody cared. They would ask for questions. Nobody would ask any. It was completely a waste of time. And I didn't learn anything because they were all basically sales presentations. And what do you learn from that? So I think that's part of the appeal of the in-person conferences, that a lot of times there is a desire to network, to share information, to go beyond that frivolous, pointless stuff that you see in the virtual conferences. But we just have to get people to remember that that's why they go to those things, and not to see Michelle Obama speak for the 5th time, or not to hear some celebrity who was on a reality show or something come and stand on stage for a few minutes. It's not the same as these real meaningful conferences. So you've had all these marketers that have come and spoken about what they do, and I know part of what you probably have to do is remind them that they're more valuable if they share what they know than if they pitch their products. And that's hard because we're marketers. We like to promote ourselves. So how do you get all these amazing and accomplished people to come? How do you get them to show up and share that knowledge and experience in a way that's really meaningful to your attendees?
Well, I mean, first of all, to be a speaker, you have to submit a video so that we can see how engaging you are. You also have to submit kind of your little detail or objectives of that. We ask for 3 takeaways of what the attendees are going to get at the end of the day. And then we do look, so we have a group that looks through every presentation prior to the day of the conference to make sure. And we do tell them up front, no promotion, nothing along those lines, no hard sell, whatever the case might be. Now, we do allow them, if they want to have a giveaway of, let's say, a white paper, or they wrote a book, we're happy to do that. They submit it to the team, and then we have a whole big kind of giveaway at the end where we either push it out through the app, happy to do that separate, but not during the presentation. So happy to work with them. And I get it.
Mhm.
95% of our speakers we don't pay, and they are there, especially if they're in an agency or something along those lines, to hopefully gain some business. I totally get it. If it's a brand, it's just to build brand equity for the most part. So we try to work with them in that way the best we can, but also ensure that the attendees aren't coming out of the session feeling like they were sold something at the end of the day and not giving something to take back. Because I think, and I think Amanda talked about a little bit ROI. You need to make sure your conference gives good hard ROI for the attendees, that they're taking something back, because their boss anymore nowadays is going to say, tell me how you're going to apply what you learned, so to speak, if we're spending $300 or $1,000 to send you to this conference. So do we fail some of the time there? And we have speakers that are yeah, of course we do, Sean. I think every conference does, and lesson learned, and we just don't invite them back again, so to speak. Or if we really do want them, we talk with them and make sure they know they've got to tighten it up a little bit. But and I think even more important than ever, Sean. And we do allow, I think we've got one company that wanted to do a demo, so we gave them a time slot, but we promote it as a demo of their software. So, we'll do something along those lines as well. So if they want to try to get in front of a potential audience. So there's ways around it to work with speakers that kind of want that extra sales sort of opportunity, so to speak.
Totally. And I think that's great that you are able to highlight, okay, if you don't want to go to this, it's a demo. If you do want to see it, hey, they're going to show it to you. So that way people know if it's a good use of their time. There's nothing worse than feeling like there was a bait and switch that happened.
Oh yeah.
That's in there.
Absolutely.
I've experienced it at many a conference.
Yeah. Well, if you end up coming to the conference, just let me, and I do reach out to my friends to say, let me know which ones were not working or whatever, just because we like to remember that for the next year out. So, which is important for us. So,
well,
and because
I definitely plan to be there, and I hope many of our audience will as well. And remember that, folks, that you can let Perry Drake know.
Well, and I think, and you had mentioned before, and I think that's the sad thing about MDMC, because I think what worked so well about MDMC in the past was we were community based. You felt like you were a part of the marketing community, because we had, our price points allow anybody to come, students, independent business owners, C-suite, manager, whatever, because we've always been in the $2 to $3 to under $400 price point. And so we've got a great array of individuals at those events, which makes for great conversation, all those sort of things. And, we still quite haven't built that back. COVID killed it, unfortunately. And I think they did that for a lot of events, and it's just trying to rebuild that connection back again. So, yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And, I know you mentioned you're active in our local marketing community, maybe, in some ways with some of the organizations a little bit less recently than you'd like to have been, because you're a busy guy. But I know that you're good friends with many of the people at the St. Louis American Marketing Association chapter, which that was where we were yesterday. You've got these students and academics who know you. You've got colleagues that come to you for help and advice. But you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. So I go to these marketing events. I went to the AMA bowling event last month. We had a great time. But I go to the coffee club. I go to some of the other organizations in town when they're having events. But I just find when I'm at a lot of these places, there's just a lot of people that stand around. They either just hang around with the people they came with, or they just stand there and they look petrified because they're terrified of networking. And we're marketers, like we ought to all be good at it. But even me, like I have to turn it on. Like there are days where I just want to stand there too. So we have to really take advantage of these opportunities to meet each other, because when we do, great things can happen. We can meet people that might have a huge influence on our career. So why is it so important for marketers to take the time to go to these sorts of events to meet each other, not to go to the virtual stuff, but to really be in person?
Well, I mean, the one thing I learned when I came back to St. Louis, which I was astounded, and I think this will answer your question, is because we're always willing to introduce somebody to somebody else. So Wes introduced me to you. I know you
Sure.
will introduce me to somebody. That somebody, and you never know where that's going to lead and how important those other people are going to be down the road. And that was the one thing that is because New York City was not like that at all. It was very corporate. Everybody wanted to work up the ladder, very
Hmm.
serious. Now, I'm not going to say in some of the agencies they didn't have fully stocked bars when you walked in, like a lot of them do here, but still, yet a little more tightly controlled. Um, and that was the one thing that astounded me. That's why my network just exploded because I think I told you, Colby's over in Damon. I was hanging out there every day. I might have had 2 or 3 meetings. They all knew me over there at Colby's. I was just networking like crazy and learning all sorts of stuff and meeting amazing people. And it's just important to expand your network base. I even tell that to my students on LinkedIn. I say, guys, I don't care. Link in with your mother's best friend. You have no idea who she's connected to. She could be connected to the HR rep at Boeing and you want to get a job at Boeing and she's connected to your mother's best friend, which you wouldn't have even known. And you know what? It's going to be interesting to see kind of this new younger generation that kind of have dealt with COVID and they kind of been behind the computer screen a lot. Um, and so they don't have those soft skills kind of, and young kids it's always a little difficult on them to deal with those soft skills. But I think COVID is maybe even jeopardized things a little bit more. And I know at UMPSL we do try, and you probably guys do as well at SIUE, try to work with the students on those soft skills and force
Hmm.
them to kind of go to events as a part of the curriculum or to speak like you just putting them in front of the camera or, things along those lines. But it's important because you just never know who's going to be able to help you down the road and guide you in the right direction. Hey, I know somebody that would be perfect to help you, or a great faculty member, or something along those lines. So you remember the old Venture Cafe days?
Oh
At
yeah, yeah,
CIC, down at CIC. I
yeah.
do miss those. I used
Hmm.
I used to take my students there. I used to actually run one of my MBA classes down there. They would give me
Oh.
that big conference with the conference room with all the big windows.
Hmm.
I used to hold one of my classes down there once a week. And I kind of miss those days. But the only thing I'll say about that, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, it got a little salesy. It was a lot of people trying to push their business cards on people kind of, but there was still a lot of great networking going. Crap. They pulled in 400 people, 500 a night, every Thursday, I think for that. I don't know if you went to those a lot, but I was
No,
there pretty
just once. Yeah,
much.
just
Okay.
once. But
Okay.
yeah, that was very cool.
Oh,
It
it
was a
was.
good
And then they had
experience.
special sessions. So that was at
Mhm.
least, um, a thing that was deliberately trying to get us together. And then they would try to have programming where if you wanted to talk about this, you could go in this room or this, you could go in this room to at least pull like-minded people together. So they were deliberately trying to do it. So kind of sad COVID shut that down.
Mhm.
But yeah, but I do agree. I think it's harder and harder to get people to connect. I think, Sean, just because of kind of what COVID did and trying to relearn some things here. So
Yeah, and I mean, yesterday at the conference, I would look for anybody that was standing by themselves, and no matter who I was talking to or what I was
right.
doing, I would immediately walk over to them, say, "Hey, I'm Sean. Why don't you come talk
Yeah.
with us?"
Yeah.
Just so they could, get an introduction. And when they
Sure.
had everybody raise their hand about how many people were frequent attendees, all the
Right.
people in the front were, but
Right.
most of the people sitting in the back of the room were new.
Right.
And
Right.
that was
Right.
also very telling to me. And I think this is true for any conference. A
Yeah.
lot of people
Yeah.
that are there, that might be their first conference. That might be their first
Right.
exposure to your whatever it is you're doing. And
Right.
if you're not greeting them, making them feel like they're part of the group, that
Right.
probably will be their
Right.
last one too.
Right, 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 right. Yeah, absolutely. You do, as you said, you kind of got to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And, you know, and when I came back to St. Louis, I thought either I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do this. And, like I said, I went to every frickin' party there was, every event there was, just to meet as many people as I could. And it was great. Loved every second of it. But yeah.
Well, one thing I've talked about with some of our other guests is that we have this tremendous well of marketing knowledge and experience here in St. Louis, but we're also not really one of those places people look to when they're looking for marketing knowledge and experience, right?
Right.
Even though we have Anheuser-Busch here, and there are people that come back from the days of working for them, or
Right.
we have some agencies that broke up into many different pieces and still have some great vestiges of those things. It's just not, we're not really a marketing hub compared to say like Chicago or some of the other large cities. So you're working to build that marketing community into something bigger than just a handful of folks. I know the AMA is. I know, hey, that's what I'm trying to do on this podcast too, right?
Right.
So how do we get marketers in St. Louis on the map as a place where marketing really matters?
Right. Well, I think some of it, and when I saw that question, I was thinking about it a little bit. I mean, I think we as these various entities could, and again, I see that's what you're trying to do. So is work a little harder with each other on kind of blasting our voice out a little bit louder to a larger audience. So we're not just kind of talking to ourselves. And I think we could do better at that. I try to work with the AMA. AMA works with me. We got 314 Digital. We've got the Social Media Club. We've got you doing a podcast. And maybe, I don't know, Sean, I'm just kind of talking out loud. Maybe it's we get a couple people from each of these entities in a room and we try to strategize of how to broadcast a little more loudly about what we're doing and kind of the cutting edge stuff we're doing, things along those lines. And maybe even get a few of the larger brands there as well. A couple people from, somebody from Energizer, from, and when you talk to people, they don't even realize all the big companies we have here.
I know.
It's like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize Energizer's there. And, so we've got a lot of big names here. But that you're very familiar with St. Louis like I am. We are not one to stand up on a stool and shout out anything about our greatness. We're just not, for whatever reason, and that comes with anything like the discussion we had earlier, even on this being a great place to raise a family, and so many times I talk to somebody and I say, how'd you get here? Well, my husband was here. I said, what do you think? I say, I love it. I'll never want to leave. Once you're here, it's like it could be a little cliquish, I think, if you don't know somebody here. But I don't know if that's any different than anywhere else, except maybe New York. I talk about New York being great, but New York's a very unique, different culture. But I'm sure everybody has its little bit of clickiness, so to speak. But I think that's just part of it. We're very humble. Is a city, I think. I don't know what your thoughts are. I'd love to share.
I guess we need to be better at the humble brag or something. We need to find a way to make that work for us.
Right. Yeah.
I'm constantly amazed. I mean, Energizer is a great example. We have Energizer Park now downtown for the St. Louis City FC, and people don't realize the connection because they just go, oh, it's Energizer Park. Energizer's a big brand. They must have just wanted a foothold here. Well, no, they have a foothold here.
Absolutely.
They wanted to support their community. Absolutely. And I think that's part of the problem is that we really don't talk enough to each other or about what we do. And that's why whenever a national crisis comes up about St. Louis, everybody knows that. But they don't know about all the positive things that are happening.
All the great things.
Almost everybody we've had on the show at some point has mentioned how family friendly the community is, and because we have a great zoo and we have a great a bunch of free things that families can do. We have Grant's Farm, which you mentioned, which is Grant's Farm is amazing. It's a connection to the President Grant, and we live there, and there's all these animals there, and there's all these cool things to see. We don't talk enough about it, and I feel like that's probably one of our biggest hurdles to overcome. But in the marketing community too, I think part of it is we have a lot of mid-sized companies, and the mid-sized companies, they're just not as impressive when you see them on a marquee, as the Fortune 500s or the Fortune 100s. And we got to overcome that too, because guess what? Some of those mid-sized companies are eating those other guys' lunch, and they're going to get acquired by them eventually because they're so good at what they do.
Well, and you don't have to be a large company to be genius at marketing ideas at the end of the day. Let's get real. Your impact might be more valuable dollar-wise, but that doesn't mean the idea is better itself. You know what I mean?
Very true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I always enjoy getting to talk about these kinds of things. And it's fun to talk with someone who's been both in the practical side as well as the academic side, because, we've had a few guests like that too. And I know even one from your department, Brianna. But but anyway, one thing I always ask guests with at the end is to plug something, anything you want. So here's your chance, and I have a
Right.
feeling I know what it'll be, but go for it.
Well, obviously, I'm going to plug my conference, the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference. So, again, this year, we got a great lineup. As you know, Sean, we have about 75 speakers. Um, it's over 2 days. With your ticket, you'll get a intensive workshop as well, which is, I think, a 2.5 hour workshop on the topic of your choosing. There's various workshops on search or Google Analytics or content creation. So you pick which one you want. And then you can also attend all the other sessions. Lunch is provided both days, which is kind of cool. Day 2 will have, I think, about 8 food trucks pulling up to the Renaissance Hotel. So it's at the Renaissance Hotel on April 29th and 30th, starting, I think, at 7:30 in the morning and going till about 4 in the afternoon. And then we've got a little reception at the end of day 1, where we'll provide some food. It'll be a cash bar, just so people can mingle, get together. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it again. So this is our, I don't know, I'd have to count 2013. So this is our 13th or 14th year. I don't know. I forget how to do that subtraction.
Right. Yeah,
It's,
you have to add COVID into the factor.
right. Well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
but COVID, we
Mhm.
pivoted, man.
Mhm.
I mean, the team decided, we told the dean, I think it was the end of January or the beginning of February, where we held on as long as we could. And then I had high school kids that were going to be busing in from like Tennessee and stuff that year. And when we saw everybody was starting to back out, then we realized, and the team pivoted quickly to all digital format, um, which we use. I think we talked about it yesterday. What did I say? We use SoundYard, or I forgot what it was.
Something along those lines. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Mhm.
kind of a podcasting sort of software to
Mhm.
broadcast everything. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the event. So again, it's www.bestmarketingconference.com. Just Google Best Marketing Conference St. Louis or MDMC, and you'll find the web page has the full agenda listed there, and should be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing you. And if you want to do podcasting, like I said, just let Wes know, and we'll get
Yeah.
you set up somewhere so
And
you could
and
do some
I'll mention
interviewing.
to listeners,
Yeah,
right before we started recording, Perry said, "Hey, Sean, come and do a live podcast at
yeah,
this event," and I'm going
right.
to totally be there, and we're totally going
Yeah,
to do it.
yeah,
So
that'd be great.
we're excited to be doing that.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, this was great, Sean. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, Perry, thanks so much for being
Yeah,
on. And of course, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or sign up for the conference, all of your details are in the show notes. Thanks so much.
yeah. Thank you, Sean.
All right, I'll stop recording there. Thanks. I know, man, just I could talk to Perry all day. He has so many incredible things to share. And in fact, after we recorded this, I did talk to him for a little while longer because we have so many things that we both are very passionate about. And when I say that I am invested in connecting the marketing community here in St. Louis, that's not just me figuring out a fun hook for the show. It is a mission. It is something that I care deeply about. And when I used to go to conferences, especially when I was in my younger years of my career, I would go and I would try to get to know people, but I was there with a networking mindset. I was there like, I need to hand out my business card. I need to tell people what I do. I need to get them to consider me when they need a survey or a focus group or in-depth interviews or anything else that I do as a research professional. And quite honestly, it didn't really work out for me. If I was going just for business, I didn't learn very much. But you know what did work out for me is I met people and I got to know people who were doing different things. And sometimes I just took away ideas. Sometimes I took away business cards and we actually would keep in contact for a little while. Sometimes I would get LinkedIn connections, whatever it was. But what I did was I connected to the community. And every now and then, when you're in a professional service like mine, somebody goes, "Hey, do you know anybody that does marketing research?" And they'll go, "Oh, yeah, I do know somebody. I know Sean, and I know him because he comes to the AMA all the time, or I met him at this conference, and it was really sharp in terms of how he was talking about things." Or maybe even, for me, I had him as a professor. So when you get out and you meet people, you find that these connections, they take root. Not every seed does anything, but sometimes these seeds take root and they really can blossom into great things. And let me just give the example. So Perry Drake and our friend Wes Morgan, who's been on the show before, and I hope to have back on again in the near future. They met at a conference, his first conference, and now Wes is helping him out with managing the vendors at this show that's coming up in a few weeks, because they got to be good friends. They know each other. And actually, Wes was the one that even referred us to talk on this show together. So sometimes those chance meetings really blossom into serious things that can benefit your career, benefit your life. So I encourage you all, please make time to come to conferences like the MDMC, any of the AMA events that we have going on, anything that we're doing in St. Louis that might be of value to you, because we want you to be part of this community. We want to hear your expertise and your knowledge, and we want to be able to not only learn from you, but to help you if we can. So that's the great thing about being part of a community, is that we all care about each other. We're all invested in each other's success. With that said, I am so excited because next week I'm going to continue talking about what I took away from the AMA conference. You're going to get to hear more of that. We'll have more guests. Some of them might even be the people that spoke at that conference coming up. It's going to be an exciting time to be listening to the Marketing Gateway podcast, and we're so glad to have you. So hope to see you at the MDMC. Again, bestmarketingconference.com. Hopefully see you there. Love to meet you in person. You can come do a marketing confessional with us at our booth. And I'd also just love to know what you think of the show and what else we could be doing to make it even more valuable for you. So please come and find me in person and tell me that. In the meantime, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway, and we will see you next time.